she has learned about self-control, what you can do to develop yourself, what you can do to help others, bringing out the things that you have in you. Hello, boss.
Isaac. Yeah, I think so. I've learned a little about focus. What for you to excuse me. Okay, for you to achieve your purpose in life, you need to be focused. Yeah, that's one thing I've learned.
Okay, so Isaac says he's learned that for you to achieve a lot in life, you need to be focused. Hi, Nanajwa. Can you please share with me something you've said?
Okay. Hey, I'm Nanaja.
Yes, Eden. Sorry.
Okay, so I learned about how to be hardworking, and we need to focus on our purpose. And then, without if we don't have the spirit of hard work, like we will not succeed. So we need to put in more effort in everything we do. Yeah, thank you.
Have your expectations been met so far?
Of course.
Um,
Okay, Scholar, let me use this side and ask my sister MFA sitting here. Have your expectations been met? I mean, we've had two presentations already, one focusing on the spirit of hard work, especially. And have you actually experienced a change mentally with these presentations?
Yes, I have, and I'm happy I came because I'm learning new things and I'm being reminded of old things I've forgotten. So I'm glad I came, and my expectations are being met.
Being met, I like the sound of that. Will you recommend Scopus to anyone based on what you've experienced?
Definitely, definitely, yeah.
Thank you so much. I believe that's the same sentiment with all of us. And with that being said, we'd like to try and get kick-started with the second phase.
which is our panel discussion, as stated earlier. So we have our moderator and we have our mentors. You already have their profiles in the brochure, but I'm just going to quickly introduce them. So when I mention the name, please you clap for them for me. Okay, so we have Reverend Xavier Fiajo, lead pastor of ICGC, His Light
Let's give him a
Sanctuary.
round of applause. He was our keynote speaker in the first session, talked extensively about hard work and the spirit of Abraham.
We also have Her Ladyship Patience Mills Tete, High Court Judge of Ghana.
So astute, so motherly, and she spent her time to be with us today. Thank you so much, Mami.
We also have Minister Jackie Impare, a musician and head of agency banking, EcoBank Africa.
Let's give a round of applause to Mrs. Jackie Paré. Thank you so much. You've graced the occasion for us. We can't wait to hear you speak.
And finally, we have the head of innovations of Guinness Ghana Breweries PLC, Mr. Benjamin Fenyi Jesse.
Let's welcome him, Mr. Benjamin Fenyi Jesse, head of innovations at Guinness Ghana, and he doubles as the convener for Skopos. He's the brain behind Skopos. Let's give him a round of applause. The brain behind Skopos. Thank you so much for gracing the occasion for us.
I believe we are blessed to have such people in our generation, people to hold our hands and help us take the lead. On that note, before the panel discussion starts, our convener has a special something for us. So, Mr. JC, without much ado, I'd hand over them. Oh, you have a mic? Yeah. So, a round of applause for Benjamin, please.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to be here. Honestly, happy to be here and to see all the faces actually representing and being part of this program. With your permission, if I can stand. So, I made a few notes, and even though I'm part of the speakers for this program, technically not a speaker, but being part of the panel, I listened a lot, and I made a few notes from the earlier presentations. I just want to reiterate a few of them because it serves as a good prelude to the conversation that we're going to be having here. Is it okay? Okay, good. So, right from Reverend's presentation to her leadership's presentation, there were a few things that kind of popped up at me. And the first one was really around, connecting with your purpose. And I think that's the foundation of this conversation. Because ultimately, if you want to excel in whichever area that you are in, I think the foundation is the purpose, and they've done justice to that. Because my job here is really to talk about the relevant relationships that each of us require to be able to achieve one, our purpose, whether in whichever area of life that you find yourself, right? So I think a few things that came up that I just want to rehash would be that we're all born into a certain system, but the God factor is ultimately important. We can't take God out, right? The second one is around the family system. If you look at relationships, you can't take your family out. Nobody chooses their own family. You are born into it, whether you like it or not. So the family system is also quite important. And then the school system. But connecting with your purpose and ensuring that you have a certain focus is number one. If you take the God factor, the family system, and other systems that are important when we talk about building relevant relationships that could propel you to the next phase of whichever endeavor that you find yourself. And leveraging those relevant relationships to stay on purpose and on focus is why we've empaneled these great people here, right? Her leadership also talked about a spirit of hard work and commitment and self-control, #rule you. I don't know if you got it, but being conscious of the Holy Spirit and the fact that God and the Holy Spirit will bring the right people your way to help you, I think it's important. Because the relevant relationships that we talk about, if you look on the screens, you would realize that the family is there, friends would be there, acquaintances would be there. You may have sexual relationships, work, professional relationship, teacher-student relationship, your community that you live in, your neighbors, your roommates, and ultimately, if your landlord is nice, you may have a certain relationship with your landlord. Actually, even if he or she is not nice, you have a relationship. The fact that you are living in the house. On the next phase, outside of all of this relationships, I think the one that we want to focus the most for today, there are three. I want us to talk about who a coach is, who a mentor is, which is actually the next phase of this amazing program that we've put together called Skopos, and then who a sponsor is, right? I think you guys have heard a few things about coaches lately. If for nothing at all, you probably have heard our national team's coach, the Black Star. And there have been a few criticisms around him, but I'm not here to talk about him. I'm talking about you as an individual having a coach. It's important. It's extremely important, whether you're doing your own work or you're working for somebody. As a matter of fact, if even you don't have any work that you do, if you've got a purpose, I think it's relevant to be in touch and in connection with somebody who understands what your passion points are, what your focus is, to be able to guide you and help you navigate the tough areas and the high points of your passion points. So a coach is important. I'll say a few things about coach afterwards. But talk about mentor, and which is the highlight of this program. I personally am I'm a good example, and for those who know me, a very good example of how beneficial a mentor could be for you. But today, I will take it from a slightly different angle. Because I am not an entrepreneurial person, but we've got entrepreneurial people in our midst, people who want to do their own, whether big or small, people who want to impact their communities in a special way, right? And people who have the big heart and the confidence to do things to transform their world. That is not to say that if you work for somebody, you can't have that level of impact. You could. But oftentimes, we downgrade the importance of a mentor in people people who are not actually working for other people or companies, and they work for themselves. Mentors are extremely important. There are some differences between all of these three key relationships I'm talking about. I'll talk about the differences shortly. But mentors are important as well. They would not technically give you the specific, technical areas that you are passionate about, but they have a world view of how things work, and they can help you navigate the way. Allow you to get in touch with other people who can actually help your cause. And they guide you, but they do much more than a coach, because your coach might be very technical and functional in your area of work or your passion area, right? But a mentor could be anybody. And anybody, I mean somebody who has got an interest to a large extent in what you're doing, but has got other areas as well, right? Which could be much more beneficial to your specific area. So much more a broader view, but can be also specific about what you're doing. The third point is quite important, a sponsor. And I think a few of the girls and boys here, girls and boys, I'm not saying ladies and gents, a few of the boys and girls here may have experienced this word slightly differently, a sponsor. I need a sponsor, Sponsors are in different forms. But this sponsor is a person who is either in a decision-making power or is very close to somebody who makes the decision and can change the decision that is being made on the table about you. A sponsor is somebody who is very open-minded, but is also passionate about what could change your life and is willing to support you, even though he is not directly connected to all the specific things that you do on a day-to-day basis. But he is big, highly connected, and not in your same circles, right? Way above you. Most of the time, they are in the corporate sector. They are your directors and your big bosses, vice chairman, and all of those big people who can make things work. But the trick is that even a cleaner can be your sponsor. You know why? Can anybody tell me why a cleaner could be a sponsor? And I'll give you a simple scenario. I work at Guinness. I've been there for nearly 3 years. But I had a few comments about other people when I joined. In the initial 2 to 3 days, I met a lot of the cleaners and the people who work, like come to clean the offices and those that we send around to buy food and all of that. I met a few of them. But I got to know much more about the business from them than my boss and my boss's boss. They told me interesting things. And I had a good relationship with them. And the relationship I had with them actually held me. There was one cleaner who was really close to the MD at the time. And the MD had a very good relationship with that cleaner. They spoke at a very practical, personal level as human beings, not as an MD and as a cleaner. And it happened that that cleaner said a few nice things about me based on the relationship I had with him. And I had a different perception from the MD, even though I hadn't, at the time, had a direct connection with the MD. So a sponsor can be at different level. It can be tricky, but most of the time, they are in decision-making power, or that sponsor is somebody who is closer to somebody who is going to make the decision. Now, before we engage our panel, including myself, in this conversation, I want you to think broadly. This is not about working in a multinational. This is not about working, being employed and working somewhere. It is part, but it's not all about it. If you're a student, you're about to get your first job, or looking for an opportunity to set up your own business, if you're unemployed, but you've got a special skill, and you are thinking about how do I take the next step and make it happen, relevant to my purpose and what I'm focusing on, right? So, of course, the foundation is always the purpose, because that's what Skopos is about. The next level of where you are now, you, whether employed, a student, unemployed, or an entrepreneur looking to make it big, I want you to engage the people here. Make comments, make input, bring your experiences to bear so we can have this conversation in a way that when we leave here, at the tail end of it, when we launch our mentorship program, which is the flagship program that this Skopos team will be leading going forward, all of us would have contributed positively to it and not just, gain from it. So 5 more minutes and I'm out of here. No, not out of here, but seated down. So the next slide, please. I just want to say a few things and then, because it's important, I throw a little bit more light on the mentor bit. Of course, before we launch the program itself, I'll take the opportunity to rehash a few things again. But the key differences between the 3 specific relationships I've talked about. In a nutshell, your coach, and please pay attention to this, because that's the foundation with which I want us to have the conversation with the panel members. In a nutshell, a coach listens to you, right? A mentor advises you. Of course, a coach can also advise you, but a coach will listen to you carefully. A mentor can listen to you and guide you, but a coach does, because it's more close to what you do. A coach is more functional. A mentor advises you, and a sponsor talks about and acts for you, talks about you and acts for you. A mentor will advise you, give you the broad views about things, guide you. A coach, of course, will advise you, listen to you, obviously, and be more specific and functional with you. But a sponsor will talk about you. A sponsor will sell you. Mentors, coaches can do that occasionally, but it is not their job to do it. You can't hold them responsible for it. But a sponsor, necessarily, they have to sell you. A mentor will guide you, and a coach will advise you, listen to you functionally, and advise you. Mentorship, we'll talk about it. On a sponsor's bit, I just want us to listen to a certain woman, talk about her briefly before we go into the conversation. A certain woman, she's called Kamala Harris. Her leadership, I don't know if you've heard about Kamala Harris. She's the, let me just give you a, you know her? Yeah, she's very famous. She works with Morgan Stanley, and those of you who have heard about Morgan Stanley. Kamala Harris is the vice chairman of wealth management and senior client advisor at Morgan Stanley. She was chair of the Morgan Stanley Foundation from 2005 to 2014. She's very passionate about this very conversation we're having today. I just want us to listen to her briefly.
It's gonna be all right. It's gonna be all right now.
And she talks about who a sponsor is, right? But she touches briefly on a mentor and a coach. Let's take a listen, and then we'll come back to the panel while the moderator leads.
It was the spring of 1988 when I had the aha moment. I was at my first round table, and for those of you who don't know, the round table was a very commonly used phrase on Wall Street to describe the year-end evaluative process for analysts, associates, vice presidents, all the way up to managing directors. That was the process where they were discussed. Presenting the cases of all the candidates. And there were other invited guests who were supposed to comment as a candidate's position was presented. It was interesting to me that those other people were folks who were more senior than the folks that were being discussed, and they theoretically had had some interaction with those candidates. Now, I was really excited to be at this round table for the first time because I knew that my own process would go through this same way and that my bonus would be decided in the same way. So I wanted to know how it worked. But more importantly, I wanted to understand how this concept of a meritocracy that every company that I talked to walking out of business school was selling. Every time I talked to a company, they would say, our culture, our process is a meritocracy. The way you get ahead in this organization is that you're smart, you put your head down, and you work really hard, and you'll go right to the top. So here was my opportunity to see exactly how that worked. So as the process began, I heard the recorder call the first person's name, Joe Smith. The person responsible for presenting Joe's case did just that. 3/4 of the way through, someone interrupted and said, this is a great candidate, outstanding, has great analytical and quantitative skills. This is a superstar. The recorder then said, sounds like Joe should go at the top in the top bucket. Second person, Mary Smith. Halfway through that presentation, someone said, solid candidate, nothing really special, but a good pair of hands. The recorder said, sounds like Mary should go in the middle bucket. And then someone said, Arnold Smith. Before the person could present Arnold's case, somebody said, disaster, disaster. This kid doesn't have a clue, can't do a model. And before the case was presented, the recorder said, sounds like Arnold should go in the bottom bucket. It was at that moment that I clutched my pearls and said, who's going to speak for me? Who's going to speak for me? It was that moment that I realized that this idea of a meritocracy that every organization sells is really just a myth. You cannot have a 100% meritocratic environment when there is a human element involved in the evaluative equation. Because by definition, that makes it subjective. I knew at that moment that somebody would have to be behind closed doors arguing on my behalf, presenting content in such a way that other decision makers around that table would answer in my best favor. that was a really interesting lesson. And then I said to myself, well, who is that person? What do you call this person? And as I thought about the popular business terms at the time, I said, wow, this person can't be a mentor, because a mentor's job is to give you tailored advice, tailored specifically to you and to your career aspirations. They're the ones who give you the good, the bad, and the ugly in a no-holds-barred way. Okay? Person can't be a champion or an advocate, because you don't necessarily have to spend any currency to be someone's champion. Necessarily get invited to the room behind closed doors if you're an advocate. It was almost 2 years later when I realized what this person should be called. I was speaking at the University of Michigan to the MBA candidates, talking about the lessons that I had learned after my 3 short years on Wall Street, and then it came to me. I said, oh, this person that is carrying your interest, or as I like to say, carrying your paper into the room, this person who is spending their valuable political and social capital on you, this person who's going to pound the table on your behalf, this is a sponsor. This is a sponsor. And then I said to myself, well, how do you get a sponsor? And frankly, why do you need one? Well, you need a sponsor, frankly, because as you can see, there's not one evaluative process that I can think of, whether it's in academia, healthcare, financial services, not one that does not have a human element. So that means it has that measure of subjectivity. There is a measure of subjectivity in who is presenting your case. There is a measure of subjectivity in what they say and how they interpret any objective data that you might have. There is a measure of subjectivity in how they say what they're going to say to influence the outcome. So therefore, you need to make sure that that person who is speaking, that sponsor, has your best interest at heart and has the power to get it, whatever it is for you, to get it done behind closed doors. Now, I'm asked all the time, how do you get one? Well, frankly, nirvana is when someone sees you in an environment and decides, I'm going to make it happen for you. I'm going to make sure that you are successful. But for many of us in this room, we know it doesn't really happen that way. So let me introduce this concept of currency and talk to you about how it impacts your ability to get a sponsor. There are 2 types of currency in any environment: performance currency and relationship currency. And performance currency is the currency that is generated by your delivering that which was asked of you and a little bit extra. Every time you deliver upon an assignment above people's expectations, you generate performance currency. It works exactly like the stock market. Anytime a company says to the street that they will deliver 25 cents a share, and that company delivers 40 cents a share, that stock goes up, and so will yours. Performance currency is valuable for 3 reasons. Number 1, it will get you noticed. It will create a reputation for you. Number 2, it will also get you paid and promoted very early on in your career and very early on in any environment. And number 3, it may attract a sponsor. Why? Because strong performance currency raises your level of visibility in the environment, as I said earlier, such that a sponsor may be attracted to you. Why? Because everybody loves a star. But if you find yourself in a situation where you don't have a sponsor, here's the good news. Remember that you can exercise your power and ask for one. But here's where the other currency is now most important. That is the relationship currency. And relationship currency is the currency that is generated by the investments that you make in the people in your environment. The investments that you make in the people in your environment. You cannot ask someone to use their hard-earned personal influential currency on your behalf if you've never had any interaction with them. It is not going to happen. So it is important that you invest the time to connect, to engage and to get to know the people that are in your environment. And more importantly, to give them the opportunity to know you. Because once they know you, is a higher probability that when you approach them to ask them to be your sponsor, they will in fact answer in the affirmative. Now, if you're with me and you agree that you have to have a sponsor, let's talk about how you identify a sponsor. Well, if you're looking for a sponsor, they need to have 3 primary characteristics. Number 1, they need to have a seat at the decision-making table. They need to have exposure to your work in order to have credibility behind closed doors, and they need to have some juice. Or let me say it differently, they better have some power. It's really important that they have those 3 things. And then once you have identified the person, how do you ask for one? The script goes like this: Jim, I'm really interested in getting promoted this year. I've had an amazing year, and I cannot show this organization anything else to prove my worthiness or my readiness for this promotion. But I am aware that somebody has to be behind closed doors arguing on my behalf and pounding the table. You know me, you know my work, and you are aware of the client feedback. And I hope that you will feel comfortable arguing on my behalf. If Jim knows you and you have any kind of a relationship, there's a very high probability that he will answer yes. And if he says yes, he will endeavor to get it done for you. But there's also a shot that Jim might say no. And if he says no, in my opinion, there's only 3 reasons that he would tell you no. The first is he doesn't think that he has enough exposure to your work to have real credibility behind closed doors to be impactful and effective on your behalf. The second reason he may tell you no is that you think he has the juice to get it done, but he knows that he does not have